Good evening, and welcome back to the Pastor Study. In the book of Exodus, we find a very interesting, I think instructive passage. Exodus chapter 11, beginning with verse 21. By day, the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. And neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place from in front of the people. You know, everything has purpose. God created everything for a purpose. In the case of the passage we just read, the pillar of fire, the pillar of cloud had a purpose. That was to lead the Israelites, to take them where they needed to be in what was known to them as the Promised Land. Certainly a place that God had described as flowing with milk and honey. Obviously a very different place than the Egypt of their slavery had been. We're created with a purpose as well. God created us to worship Him. When we are failing to worship, then we're failing at our purpose. We can be doing a lot of other things. We can do a lot of other good things, necessary things. But if we're not worshiping, we're failing at our purpose. Now, I could spend all night and half of tomorrow talking about what worship is. But at the very outset, let me say worship is far more than just singing choruses or songs on Sunday morning, although that is certainly part of it. Worship is an attitude. Worship is understanding the one whom we worship, so that we know why we're doing what we're doing and who we're worshiping and what we're worshiping Him for. When Adam sinned, his worship relationship with God was broken. God came looking for him in the garden, looking for a relationship, looking for interaction, and he finds Adam hiding. Why? Because Adam knew he had broken his worship. God calls to us to be people of worship. If we're not, we're like the folks that Jude talked about, clouds with no rain. Perhaps you've been in a place of drought, a place where it's been a long, hot, dry period, and you see clouds coming up on the horizon, and you think, oh, finally it's going to rain, only to find that the clouds produce no rain, or they go north or south of you, and you're left dry and continuing the drought. I wonder sometimes if God looks at us and sees a drought in our worship. He sees that we avoid Him. He sees that our prayer time has dwindled to nothing, that our worship time is just simply a few worship choruses on Sunday morning and nothing else. We were created for purpose. That purpose is worship. And again, if we fail at that, we failed at the very basic thing that God created us for. Human beings that don't worship are like guitars with no strings, or drums with no drum head, a wind instrument with no reed. Oh, the form is there, but the function is long gone. And as a guitar player, I can tell you that not only do I have to have strings on my guitar, they've got to be in tune. I've got to replace them periodically because they lose their tone. They in effect become dead, and I need to put on fresh strings. All of those things are necessary for me to be able to properly play a guitar, and especially to use it as a worship instrument. There are things in our lives, the strings, if you will, that really need to be in place if we're going to worship. And the very first part of that has to be our relationship with the Father. Our purpose is to worship. That only comes when we have relationship. And when we fail to worship, we're like Adam in the garden. God comes calling, but we're not answering. Let me suggest this. Paul in 2 Corinthians tells us that periodically we are to examine ourselves to see if we're still in the faith. Let me alter that a little bit. Maybe we need to examine ourselves to see what our worship quotient is. That is, are we fulfilling our duty? Are we fulfilling the requirement that God has placed upon us to be people of worship? That might be something worth thinking about. And I look forward to seeing you next time in the Pastor Study.